Good afternoon and welcome along, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Posturite Virtual Conference. My name's Matt Jones. I'm one of the regional managers here at Posturite. We've also got Adele and Emily, who've done a fantastic job setting everything up for today, and you might see their names pop up in the Q&A with announcements, and we'll also be on hand for any technical support, but hopefully we won't be needing any of that. It's great to be able to introduce an event that has the word post in front of the word pandemic, after these very tough months we've all had. Those of you familiar with Posturite over the years will know that we like to put right at the end of a lot of things, but for this event we're putting the word post, that part of our name, in front of pandemic. We're saying post-pandemic, but we know there are still some challenges ahead, and some of you will no doubt have friends, family or colleagues in other areas of the world who are not quite as far down the line as we are. And even here in the UK, we still face many challenges, such as the safe returning of colleagues to sites, with logistics around PPE, lateral flow testing and air ventilation, the safety and health of colleagues working from home on a more regular or even permanent basis, mental health issues, and other areas that you'll no doubt be involved with your roles. So we hope that the broad range of subjects we're going to cover in the next 2 days help to inform, educate, and knowing some of our presenters, especially coming next, maybe even entertain you a little. We'd love to hear your thoughts as we go, and please send your questions in and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can during the Q&A at the end of each session. If we don't have time to answer them all, please feel free to send them in to events@posturite.co.uk. We'll pop that email address in the chat for you, and our team will pick these up with the experts and respond to you soon. The sessions are all being recorded and links will be sent out to you in the next few days. So if you do need to dash off to an emergency call or can't make all the sessions you wanted to, you can catch up on them in your own time. One last thing to mention before we get going is that closed captions or subtitles are enabled if you'd like to turn them on. So we'll get straight into the first session now with Katharine and Louise on what we learned from lockdown working and lessons for the future. Katharine Metters, who I'm sure many of you will already know, needs no introduction, and Katharine is joined by Louise Shipley, who heads up the Workplace Health Division at Fellows Europe, Fellows being the global leader in workplace solutions, and who've carried out a huge amount of research over recent months. So both very well placed to cover this subject. So I'll hand over now to Louise. Hi, Louise.
Hello, Matt. Thank you very much for the introduction.
No problem.
And welcome, everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me clearly. So Katharine and myself are going to do a tag team in this session. I'm going to start off, and then Katharine is probably going to make some comments as we go through, and then is going to close out the session, really looking at some solutions for the future as we go forward. So just to start this section off, I guess one of the first things to say is that clearly the pandemic has driven a lot of different behaviours across our country, and particularly in the workplace. And I think it's fair to say there's been a lot of media headlines in and amongst all of the pandemic headlines, really on the impact that working from home has had on a lot of our employees' mental health and their physical health, because overnight, really, we were instructed to go and work from home. And many businesses actually haven't returned to the office over the last year or so, and a lot of businesses really were struggling to understand, what's the best way of servicing their employees in this situation. And equally, many employees were also thinking, how can I create the right workspace and really look after myself whilst I'm in this situation. So I think you'll all be familiar with a lot of these media headlines over the past few months. And then what it's also probably brought to your attention is probably made you think about some of the experiences that you've had yourselves. So I've just put on here some of the keywords that potentially all of you will have been feeling or thinking about over the past few months, as well as the pandemic has developed, and you've been looking at how you can best really mobilize your teams in these obviously unprecedented situations. So you may have been experiencing anything from shock, certainly in the first weeks and months, to a sense of real unpredictability in terms of how do we actually manage this and deal with it, maybe despair, but then maybe resolve and a real feeling of determination in terms of if this is here for for the medium to long term, what kind of solutions can we arrive at to really help our people and our employees and our business to deal with this situation in the best way possible. So it'd be interesting to hear, and as Matt said, please put some questions and comments in the chat, what your own experiences have been over the last few months as well. So in terms of this particular session, Katharine and I are here today to really help try and demystify the whole working from home piece. So we will be sharing some of the research that we've carried out over recent months in terms of really what employees are experiencing as they've obviously gone through the journey over the last few months in terms of working from home. We don't necessarily have all the answers, but we're certainly here to help you find those answers and to give you some of the insights from the research we've been carrying out. So just broadly, here's the brief agenda we're going to be going through today. We're going to be covering off what the research actually tells us, looking at some of the solutions that are available, and as Matt said, at the end we can have a Q&A session. So interested to hear what your thoughts are and your questions as well. So just as we go into the research piece, just to share with you, this was research that was carried out at the end of last calendar year. We carried it out amongst 1,000 employees across the UK in lots of different sectors, job roles and age groups as well as geographical locations. We also included a number of senior managers, so employees who are perhaps in charge of teams within the research as well. And for anybody who's maybe got a broader remit, we actually carried out this research as well in France, the Netherlands, Germany, Spain and Italy as well. So around 7,000 respondents in total, which gave us a really nice sample across the whole of Europe. So just to touch on some of the key themes that we saw coming out of this research and in terms of what it actually tells us. These were really the key headlines. So in terms of the headline message, and I'm sure this is not a surprise to a lot of you as you've had conversations with your own teams internally about this and read a lot of the media, the media headlines and some of the media articles that have been in the press continuously over the last few months. Certainly working from home has had a number of drawbacks, but what it has allowed people to do is have a work-life balance. And so 89% of those people who replied would really like to work from home long term, but they really see it being a mix between working from home and going into the office or other locations that may be relevant for their line of work. So actually only 42% of them would like to work from home a couple of days a week. So this is this research I think really underlines the need to potentially consider a hybrid model of working as offices reopen and businesses reopen and employees have got an opportunity to go back into the office. I think the important things to think about is where home working and both corporate office working win and lose. Certainly home working wins out when it comes to having more flexibility and, as I mentioned, a work-life balance. I think that's certainly those areas where employees thought it was important. But equally, they very much see the corporate office being important as well to make people feel engaged and motivated, and most importantly as well, ergonomic and comfortable, because clearly one of the issues that we've had when we were all sent home overnight is not everybody has necessarily the right equipment, certainly for working medium to long term at home. So these were the real key factors that came out of the research in terms of where they saw the benefits of going back to the corporate office. But I think the important thing is that in terms of productivity, it really came out as a balance between the two, depending on the type of work that they were doing. Whether it was a period that required concentration or a period that required collaboration, definitely there's pros and cons between these two locations for the employees that responded to the survey. But I think the main thing though is that there are some worrying underlying trends, and as I alluded to in the intro slide about the media headlines, without a doubt, working from home has impacted mental and physical health. And I'm just going to list here some of the things that came up in the survey. In terms of the most common symptoms of mental strains, the most common really were feeling tired or having a lack of energy, feeling stressed and anxious, and clearly that's not just about working from home. That's in collaboration with the whole stress with the pandemic, and is my job safe? How am I going to manage going forward if they're homeschooling children, etc. All of these things were really part of the mix as well. But also, importantly, feeling lonely or isolated also came up as one of the key areas that concern people as a result of the survey. From the physical side, the most common physical strains that they experienced were areas around a stiff neck, strained eyes, sore aching back, and headaches. And a lot of these are obviously associated with potentially not having the right chair or the right desk or their screen or their equipment at the right height or distance away from them. And so I guess because a lot of people didn't necessarily have the right equipment, it's no surprise that they're really suffering from these symptoms. I think also, just as a kind of summary to this section, around half of those responding said they definitely had more aches and pains and strain at their home workstation than compared with their corporate office workstation, which again is probably not a surprise given the reasons that I outlined a little bit earlier on.
Louise, I mean, that's very interesting looking at the research, because we did a bit of research when we swapped at the beginning of the pandemic from going from face-to-face assessments predominantly to remote. And I asked people to keep a track of what was being seen. And, within the first sort of 6 weeks, we saw a huge growth in sort of neck and upper back problems, I think because of the hunching over laptops. And that continued until sort of, I suppose, 2-3 months. And then we started to see the more common lower back pains and that sort of thing that we'd seen in the office. So it's really interesting to see sort of the long-term research fitting in very well with our sort of anecdotal sort of findings as we swapped as well. So I think that's quite interesting.
Definitely, yes. And I think, obviously as the weeks and the months went on, this is when people really thought, I've got to do something about this, because actually this is giving me a mental strain, or it's giving me a physical strain, and it's all right maybe for a day or two, but or a week, but then going forward it's just not sustainable at all.
Yeah, and you can't separate mind and body, and if you're feeling tired, you're going to be adopting poor postures, or you're thinking, oh, I'm going to go and sit on the sofa for a bit, and then of course that then causes other problems. And so the two really feed off each other, which is not a great place to be, particularly when one goes from lockdown to staying at home to another lockdown. I mean, I think our minds and our bodies have really been through the mill a bit, haven't they?
Definitely, yes, yeah. So in terms of other areas, working patterns have also been very much impacted. So one of the interesting observations from the research, and again, I think this comes up in other surveys as well, is that nearly half of those who replied really stated that they work longer hours when they're working from home than again in the corporate office. And this included taking just over an hour away from their desk per day on average. So when you think about lunch breaks, coffee breaks, the breaks that we would normally take, comfort breaks, etc., these were literally just adding up to an hour when people were working away from home for virtually half of the people who replied. So, certainly not taking as many breaks as we'd generally encourage people to take. And interestingly, what came out of this is actually they're telling us that their employer is actually encouraging them to take breaks and time away from their desk throughout the day. So it's not necessarily that they're not being encouraged and asked to do this. As you can see there, 72% saying that this was happening. But conversely, 35% are saying they feel the need to be available at all times of the day, at the end of that Teams call or whatever the case may be, whatever technology is being used. And actually 27% are really struggling to separate their home life from their office life. So again, there's a real sort of contrast here. Employers are definitely encouraging people to do this, but for whatever reason, employees are not feeling confident and empowered to be able to do that. And I think this is probably linked with the job security issue that people have been experiencing over the last year as well, in terms of, is my job safe? Is it still going to be there? I just need to make sure that I'm making myself feel needed. and required, and also the fact that, you know, people were put in this situation so quickly without really any sort of coaching or training in terms of, you know, how to go about separating their home from their office life. So I think these are really important things. You know, should hybrid working really be the way of the future, that we need to just make sure that people do really work to separate their home from their office life. So what support have employees received? So I think what's interesting is, you know, a number of them have said they have received some good support. 58% saying their employers supported them by, you know, creating a healthy home working environment, which is great. And around 55% were actually asked to complete a workstation risk assessment, be it online or on paper, or however, you know, whether it's a telephone risk assessment, however that might be. So, you know, we are seeing some really positive signs there, and employers really taking responsibility, I think, for employees, you know, as they move to this work from home situation. And actually 61% said they were provided with equipment by their employer, which is also good news. On the other side, 10% are saying they've requested equipment but never received a reply, and around 5% are saying they had their request actually rejected. So I think, you know, that there's some good signs and good developments there, but potentially some way to go. And given that this research was carried out, what it would have been sort of 9 months into lockdown, you would have hoped by then that potentially a lot of discussion had taken place between employees and employers with regard to their needs. So
yeah. Do you know, Louise, you are such a glass half full lady. You know, I look at those figures. I look at those figures and I go, you know, there's a legal duty here to look after your staff. And we've got, you know, 40% of people not even, you know, really doing the basics. And, you know, sadly, we work with some fabulous employers, but also I've had phone calls, and sort of I have two very common questions I've had over lockdown is, what's the minimum I have to do for my staff? And I sort of go, oh, okay, where are we going with that one? And then the next question is, well, who has to pay? And for me, it begs the question, you know, you've got your best and most expensive asset. Surely you want to look after that, your people. But also, are you looking at getting the job done, or are we getting by? You know, and it's really interesting, as I say, you know, very much glass half full from you. Me, I'm a little bit more cynical, I suppose, going, what about the rest of them?
That's why we make a good partnership. No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's you know, going forward, definitely. And I know you've got some speakers on over the next couple of days who are going to be talking about the more legal aspect, let's say. But yeah, without a doubt, I think you know, employers need to work with employees to really look at what their needs are and how they can be fulfilled in this area, and especially if it's going to be a medium to long term phenomenon going forward. You know, employers can't work from home. Employees can't work from home without the right equipment. So what's also interesting from this research is that employees have actually invested themselves. So what we actually found was, and probably in contrast to the previous numbers, this is quite astonishing. Around 65% of people actually bought their own home office equipment to make home working more comfortable and more convenient and easier, and all those things that we know are important for a workforce. But what is equally interesting, or even more so, is that these people are spending a lot of money, and actually it averaged out at around £1,300 on this equipment, which I have to say we were absolutely staggered at. And when you think about, you know, maybe the need for a chair, a desk, your technology, maybe your, you know, a light or whatever it might be, I don't know, ergonomic equipment, when you add all those things up, you know, some people have made a real investment here in creating the right space for themselves. And I think there's a couple of reasons for this, really. One is that you know, home working and the association with comfort and productivity and all of those important things is important to a lot of people. You know, if they're sat working however many hours they are at home a day, in a poor situation with poor equipment, and it just very, very quickly starts to run people down, and, you know, create all those things we don't want to create in terms of demotivation, disengagement, etc. in a business. So I think a lot of individuals actually recognize themselves and have just thought, you know what, whilst I'm waiting for my business to sort out how they're going to deal with this, I'm just going to go and buy it myself. And I think maybe this is also coupled with a number of people thinking, do you know what, I think we're going to be here for the long term. Even when the pandemic's over, I think I'm going to continue to work from home in some capacity or shape or form. So I think there's those two main things that are working together here. Okay, in terms of what solutions can employers offer, without a doubt, people are saying they would like a better home working environment to help them be more productive, motivated, engaged, those things we've just talked about. And what they're telling us is that in order to improve their home workstation, they're most likely to want a better back support from their chair, or a new chair, and interestingly, the ability to not have to spend so much time sat down. So the last point particularly, I think, is very much linked with the fact we've all been glued to Teams or Zoom or whatever the collaboration or communication tool has been of choice within a business, and that has meant that we've just not moved around enough at all over the last few months, over a year now for some people. And I think this is very, very much linked to the fact that people are just not taking any breaks either. So they're not able to take breaks because they are on back-to-back meetings on Zoom or Teams. And this is also linked with the fact that they are spending too much time sat down, because, you know, the ability to not sit down requires either having a standing desk or somewhere to stand. And a lot of people just haven't got to that stage yet. So I think this is really interesting. We know a chair often comes up with these things as the number one requirement, but I think particularly the ability to not spend so much time sat down is a really interesting one here, and one to think about as we move forward. So what do employees want for the future? So this is probably not unsurprising at all. I guess what I'm doing here is attaching some statistics or data to it. You know, they definitely see a greater reliance on technology and virtual setups without a doubt. And I think, you know, if we'd have asked any of you to say this to us, I'm sure these are some of the things you would have come up with. They also foresee greater flexibility from employers, and I guess, you know, more give and take there, and more of a discussion about, you know, actually where's the best place for me to work to be the most productive for the tasks I need to do. And a number of them also see a blended approach where they spend part of the time at part of the week at home and part of the week in the office as well. So I don't think any of these are necessarily a surprise to us all. I think that these are things that have been talked about now for a few months into the pandemic, and you know, without a doubt, we're going to see these discussions continue going forward. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to segue into something that might be a little bit more of a light entertainment for you. So I don't know whether any of you remember Emma, our work colleague of the future. We launched Emma actually a few months before the pandemic hit. And Emma was developed really to shine the light on what potentially people could look like in 20 years' time if they continue to work with poor posture and you know, without movement in their working day. Well, interestingly, Emma has been also unfortunately working from home, so we just wanted to share with you a little bit of the experience that Emma's found as well from working from home. So hopefully this will work, and I'll share this with you. And on that note, I hope that provided you with some food for thought. I'm going to pass over to Katharine.
Thank you, Louise. Yes, I'm definitely doing a few more neck exercises after that. I certainly, Emma's neck posture really does terrify me. And so, yes, thank you for that. So really, I just want to sort of bring this all back a little bit, and just to sort of summarise, you know, the changes that that we've seen have been quite considerable. I mean, they're not all bad. Nobody would have wished this situation on us. But I think it's allowed time for people to consider how they want to work. Technology has increased over the years, and it's very difficult to make changes. But this pandemic has provided, I suppose, a catalyst for us to reconsider many things. And I think people have very much thought about their work and how they like to work and how they're best to work. We've also discovered some better ways of working. Those of you that know me will know that I'm not particularly technologically minded. But even I have managed to make the jump into some of these technologies. And I think we're beginning to realise that, you know, we've got different tools at our disposal, things, you know, email and Teams and, you know, and those sorts of things. But what we need to do is make sure we blend these things correctly, so we use the right tool for the right job. You know, Teams is great for dropping into somebody's conversation, having a real sort of a chat about something, but you still want to use your email for sort of the longer term and sharing documents and that type of thing. I've also been very privileged to be able to go into the office at various times because of my role and see people, although at a distance, and also really value the face-to-face aspects and realize just what a benefit that is as well. So I think change is good, but I think we now need a time of reflection to actually think, how do we pick the best bits out of this? And in fact, I suppose from talking to many people, this change was coming. We all saw these opportunities. I myself have worked at home on and off for about the last 14 years. But this has now allowed us to share some of the opportunities with other people too. So I think we already have quite a lot of information to start from. We just now need to assimilate this just to make sure we take the best from it. The other thing we need to think of is, at the moment, we're thinking how we can do it. But I think we also need to think what our customers and the people we interact with also want. I've been very frustrated, like many of us, been doing business with people and finding their systems are difficult and slow. And yes, people have managed to work from home, but sometimes it's not always a better way. So we need to also bring that back. So I think probably I want to say that, yes, we've experienced a lot of change. Change is good, but also we need time to stop and think. And that's one of my first things I think to say is it's time to stop and think. Louise, could I have the next slide, please? I want to talk a little bit about adaptability. One of the fantastic things that humans have is that ability to adapt. But I think we need to remember that if change is rapid and prolonged, it can lead to physical and mental and productivity concerns. And I think Louise has highlighted that very much from the research. So yes, we have managed, but do we want to continue with that, or is there a better way? And I think this is the time to stop and think about that. We need to think, once we've got what is the best way of working for us, for our employees, for our clients, for our productivity, we then need to search out those tools and those support networks to do that. And the great thing is most of them are already available to us. You know, sort the setup, I like to say, you know, so that could be, you know, set up at home, collaborative setup in the office. All these tools are already available to us, and over the next few days next few days, today and tomorrow, hopefully we'll give you some of the options that are already available to you, so you can have a look at those. We also need to look at the communication systems. That is, you know, we need to make sure everybody knows how to use the new systems and that they work, and that can be managers and employees. We've also got to remember the different generations, I'm afraid. Somebody like me needs different abilities to learn how to use new communication systems, whereas other people are much quicker at adapting to them. So I think we need to very much focus on how that is done and make sure that everybody learns the new ways, not just assume that everybody's managed and we can just continue with that. And I suppose aligned in that, we need to look at our training programs. We need to talk very much about collaborative working. It's something that, yes, I've worked in teams and I've worked on projects, but I'm not sure I've worked in the collaborative way using the technology before. And I'm sure that I only know about 10% of what could be done. And providing training for people means that we'll get the best out of it, and we really will support the economic boost that people are beginning to talk about. So I think we really need to look at that. So yes, we've managed, humans, we've adapted, but now it's time to move forwards and say, what is good? What do we need to keep and move forwards, and what do we need to change? So could I have the next slide, Louise, please? And this, I suppose, comes as no surprise. Assessment and planning are key to us going forwards. So once we've thought about, how our business is going to benefit coming out of this pandemic, what has worked well, what tasks can be done at home, what tasks are better done in a more formal environment, how our collaboration is going to work, we then need to look at assessing those, whether it be assessing individuals' workstations, whether they be at home or in the office, or actually a hybrid assessment of the work that they do. We need to do that, and then we can put in place the tools to support them working well like that. Again, we need to look at our office environment. That may change. A lot of people have reduced their office space, not expecting all their staff to be at home. I think I've heard a lot of sort of 60 to 80% desks compared to in the past. So there's going to be a radical change in what the office looks like. And we need to assess that, and we need to make sure that it works for people and it's safe. I also think we need to look at looking about how humans work well. Looking with how well-being and wellness is very much on the agenda. So how we design our environments will make a big difference to how we thrive in the future. We know that biophilia, such as the green plants and plenty of outdoor exposure is good for us. We know that having clean and tidy workspaces is not only good for our health, but also good for our reflection. Not all collaboration work will be noisy, so are we going to need to create some quiet spaces? And not everybody is the same, so all of us will want different preferences. So we need to look at our spaces and we need to assess them for the safety and the suitability for the future. And I suppose just the last sort of note on this is also to say, returning to site, sadly, COVID has not gone away. And we will be living with managing COVID probably for several years. And not only COVID, but other things. The flu is predicted to be more disruptive this year. So we need to look at the cleanliness. We need to look at the air quality. We know how much more about transmission these days. So yes, we need to look forward and take forwards all these lessons that we've learned into a better balance of life for employees, taking the tools that we've learned to use so well into the future and working better. But we also must not forget the basics as well that we've used in the past. So that may be simple things in the office as to, fire safety, first aid, those sorts of things, as well as the cleanliness. So let's not forget the basics as we move forwards to the future. Very conscious of the time, actually. So let's have the last slide, Louise, which I think is really all about questions. Oh, there you go.
Yes.
And I think really it's over to Matt to see, have we got any questions come up, Matt?
Yeah, thanks guys, that was brilliant. We've had quite a few questions come in, so I'm conscious of time, like you say. Just a reminder that if we don't answer your questions, please email them into us and we'll respond to you when we can. events@posturite.co.uk. So pop them in an email if we don't get around to them now. So Nicola asked, do you think that greater use of Teams and Zoom for calls has made workers more static? At some point we could get up and take calls on our phones. Now we have to be static in front of a screen.
Oh, well, shall I take that, Louise?
Yes, by all means.
Basically, it's only as static as you wish it to be. I think using Teams and can be a very dynamic experience. I have a very long lead on my cable, and I also have a wobble board. So quite often I will stand up whilst on a Teams meeting and on a call and use a wobble board, which causes great calamity because people think I need to go to the loo. So it can do, but I think it's up to every single one of us whilst on a call to be active and encourage others to be active.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think also people haven't explored the ability to be mobile and active whilst they are on these calls. It's all been so new to everybody. I just don't think they've got to that stage, and that's something that we definitely need to do as a next step. The other thing I would just add is that certainly I know that that Teams is on a phone app, so encouraging people to use Teams calls certainly on a phone app rather than on their screen might be one way of encouraging activity.
A useful tip, Louise. Actually, I don't use that on my phone. I only use it on my computer. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks, guys. This was a question actually for Louise. What do you think is the most important / interesting finding from the research?
So I think one of the most exciting things and interesting things, I'm not sure it's very exciting, it's a little bit daunting to be honest, is how much people have spent equipping their own home workstation. I think we were all amazed when those numbers came in. In fact, I asked the research agency to check them again and recheck them because I thought this is ridiculously high. And so I think that's been one of the most daunting things. We've got a little bit of insight into what exactly that involved, but you've just got to try and put yourself in individual shoes when they're trying to create the perfect home workstation, and it can involve lots of different things, whether it's a desk, whether it's a screen, whether it's even the equipment, because some of them I'm sure will have been sent home without any laptop or anything else. So there's lots of different areas it covers, which employers need to be aware of and really address in conversation with their employees.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Louise. This one made me laugh. I find the problems with embracing technology is that it's continually changing. I'm spending too much time learning the new way to do things. Would you agree? And I think we all found that when we logged into Teams this week in preparation for the event, didn't we? And a few buttons had changed. So yeah, have you got any comments on that one, guys?
Oh, yes, there's a bit of a Luddite. I do agree, but I do think even I'm finding it easier. I am very fortunate with a member of our team who is always available to me and will quickly help me resolve my issues. So I think the thing is, because we learn in different ways, having good support networks will actually help speed us up on that a little bit more. But yes, I do agree.
Great. If you've got their number, Katharine, that would be great.
I think you know them.
Great. I think we've got probably time for one quick question. Well, it's more of a comment actually. Ari, the always being available point, I've seen some email signatures updated with I work flexibly, so regardless of the time of day I send this email, please do not feel you have to respond outside of your own working hours. This is encouraging to see. I guess you guys would agree with that.
Yes, definitely. That's really great forward thinking.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. But I think we've got a long way to go before people actually believe it. And it's a cultural change, isn't it? And I think we've all got some responsibilities to reinforce that message and to make sure everybody is not under pressure to always be on. Great.
Well, thanks, guys. That was brilliant. That's all we've got time for on this session. Hopefully, we'll see you on the next session starting in about 5 minutes' time. So go and stretch your legs, go and get some fresh air, and we'll see you very soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks.